Welcome, everybody. It's Train Tuesday. I'm your host, Jim Wiggin, and man, what a great weekend a lot of us had. Attended the St. Louis RPM meet this past weekend and got to see a lot of you out there. Thanks for stopping by the booth and saying hi. It's always good to put a name to that face, and also had some great modeling that was shown off over the weekend, and I'll share a little bit of that here in a little bit. But like we always do, I've got comments coming in to my right, your left. Let's see who's joining us today. Let's go on over and check out. We've got George, Kevin, Ian, Joseph, Ricky, Michael, Brandon, Frederick, Will, and Will's coming in from Ontario, Canada. Welcome aboard. We got Christopher. We've got Dale, Amy, and Jonathan. So we got a full house today. This is great. I want to thank you all for coming on board, and wow, what a month. Now, if you guys missed it, last Tuesday, Ken Jr., in conjunction with Tony Cook from White River Publications and James Wright from his YouTube channel, hosted Matt Donnelly over from Amtrak because it's a momentous year for Amtrak. It's their 50th anniversary. And it seems hard to believe that Amtrak is now 50 years old. And in conjunction with that live feed that we had last Tuesday, we introduced something a little early. And if you were here on Friday, our developers, John and Janik, came to you live from their prospective workshops and showed you just what's coming this month. And one of those things that we're going to talk about today are those Genesis Amtrak units. So before we get started, go ahead and put your hobby knife down. Make sure your beverage of choice is by your side. Put your feet in the upright position and enjoy the show. Let's get some more shout outs and then we'll get started. So I want to say hello to the folks that have just joined us: Logan, Ted, Jason, Mark, William, Jeff, and Jeff's coming in from St. Louis. So hopefully you saw us this past weekend, Jeff. We've got Chris and Patrick and KC. So welcome aboard, guys. So like I was saying, we've got the Amtrak 50th anniversary units that I'm going to show with you today. And you've got till basically the end of the month. You've got August 27th that you can go down and talk to your dealer and order these really interesting paint schemes, throwback paint schemes, all in celebration for the 50th anniversary of Amtrak. So let's get started. Just like always, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And here we are. Now, these two pictures here, these were sent to us from Amtrak. These are Amtrak publicity pictures. And it's showing the different phases that we are going to do. Now, we're doing the Midnight Blue, the Phase 4, the Phase 5, the Dash 8 version of or Phase 3, and of course Phase 1, where it all started. So let's go ahead and take a look at each locomotive. So starting out the Genesis lineup is going to be this unique paint scheme here. Now, the reason why Amtrak chose to do this paint scheme in this midnight blue color is it's also a way for Amtrak to say thank you to all the hardworking individuals that make Amtrak possible. And of course, much like any type of service, these folks are up day and night, and many of them are up during the middle of the night to make sure that your ride on Amtrak is comfortable and unique. So they went ahead and did this paint scheme here, and it's a really sharp version of their paint scheme, that midnight blue, almost a black color. Trimmed off very nicely with the red and white, and of course the new 50th anniversary Amtrak logo. Connecting America for 50 years, and that's exactly what Amtrak has done. Now let's not forget, back in the bad old days when private railroad companies sought to get rid of passenger service, Amtrak was formed, and it was a way to keep folks on the rails. And it was touch and go at first. It was a little tough. But through it all, Amtrak persevered, and through different management that came up through the years, it kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So it makes you wonder what the next 50 years with Amtrak is going to be like. And it's really interesting to see how this passenger service started and where it's gone. So coming up next is another anniversary paint scheme. And this is kind of a variation of their current scheme. And it's also, as if my memory serves me correctly, Matt was saying this is kind of a good bridge paint scheme between the current and what will be the new paint scheme that Amtrak will be using in the future. But a real patriotic red, white, and blue, nicely trimmed with black. And again, you've got your Amtrak logo and you've got your Connecting America for 50 Years logo. This is the second Genesis locomotive that we will be offering in this lineup. Now coming up next, this paint scheme looks rather familiar. It's a scheme that's been out for a number of years, but it's been added to just ever so slightly with the anniversary logo applied to it. This is engine number 46, of course. And this is the third locomotive that we'll be offering in this, this packet. Now, if you're like me and you remember back in the 90s, the Dash 8s had come up to Amtrak. And the reason for this paint scheme, Matt Donnelly gave us a brief history on this paint scheme. The reason why they came up with this paint scheme is, if you remember, the Dash 8 was a somewhat boxy locomotive. It was certainly not a streamlined locomotive like the predecessors and the current locomotives. So they came up with this paint scheme here. And even though they're all pretty much angled stripes, the way they wrap themselves around the body with the other colors, it really just made the whole locomotive body flow. Now, rail fans years later would call this the cola scheme or various other paint scheme nomenclature, but the most common was the soda or the cola scheme. It looked very similar to a popular soft drink at the time, and just a really eye-catching paint scheme, and it looks just as good on the AMD 103 as it did the Dash 8. So this will be the fourth one that we're going to be offering in this lineup. And then last but not least, where it all started. This is the paint scheme that was the most common in the beginning. It wasn't the very first, but it was the most common in those early years. And this paint scheme could be seen on former Rhodes E units and later on the F40s. And sometimes rail fans refer to it as the bloody nose because it's got that red nose. There were other names for it as well, but it's probably the most iconic paint scheme Amtrak had. And this will be the fifth one that we're offering. So I want to go over some of the things that we've done with the P42s, because there are some great things that we've done to these locomotives besides just really cool paint schemes. Now, if you go to our website, we do have these available online. If you go to athearn.com and go to the new announcements or hit the Amtrak banner, you'll be taken to a page with all the new announcements that we're talking about, not only today, but for the rest of the month. But this is brand new Genesis tooling. Now, don't forget, we've offered these once before, but there's still new tooling. They're, of course, all officially licensed. We had a great working relationship with Amtrak. We continue to have that great working relationship with Amtrak, and so they've helped us quite a bit. Now, one thing that I do want to say, since at least one of these locomotives is still in the paint shop, these paint schemes, they're subject to change. So if something should change on the full-scale locomotive, Amtrak is working with us so that our developers make sure that they get those finer nuances all ironed out before you receive them. That way, when you receive them next year, you know you're getting a locomotive that is of the utmost authenticity. Now, these can be purchased with either the Tsunami 2 DCC decoder, or you can also get them DCC ready with the quick plug-and-play technology with a 21-pin NEM connector. Of course, you're going to see such Genesis features such as the flexible rubber MU hoses, rubber train line hoses, And of course, these are scaled down from actual blueprints of the AMD 103 P42s. In many cases too, the nose is exactly as it appears on the full-scale prototype. They don't have the same nose. They have different bolt-on noses. Amtrak did this because, unfortunately, grade crossing accidents can be a problem in this country. And so they had developed a bolt-on nose. Well, there's two different types of bolt-on noses that are represented within this line. Of course, all of those separately applied details on a Genesis model, they're all there. And of course, it's going to include LED lighting. And you can bet that because of the nice solid frame, heavy frame, this is a pulling locomotive. You'll have no issues with pulling on this locomotive. I've already gotten a lot of reports back. A lot of you that saw me at the RPM meet said that the first set of Genesis units that you picked up were just great pullers. And we're hearing a lot of great comments from you all out there. So if you've got the first run, or maybe you missed the second run, here's your chance. These are not going to last long. So I sincerely hope you'll get on the pre-order list, because again, these types of paint schemes, they always sell out quick. So just play it on the safe side. Go ahead, ask your dealer to pre-order one of these right now. Now, that's not the only Genesis thing that we've got to talk about today. I'm also going to be talking about tank cars. We're releasing the Genesis 33,000 tank cars once again. And these are being offered in two different types, the older flat side tank cars, as well as the more modern tank cars. So these are good for anybody that's modeling from the 1980s, 1990s up to current day. So once again, I'm going to share my screen. All right. So tank cars are an interesting car, and they're actually, from what I hear from you folks out there, they're kind of high in demand. We've got plenty of box cars on our layouts, but there's always room for a tank car. And these tank cars definitely fill the need that your layout might like. Now, these are Genesis quality pieces of rolling stock. So they're going to have all of those small details. And these are best for your home layout or a large club layout. You're not going to want to transport these quite as easily as you would, say, a ready to roll or certainly a roundhouse. But for those really cool pictures that you're taking of your layout, these are certainly going to hold up to the camera and the prying eyes of your buddies. Let's just go through these briefly, give you an idea of what we're offering on this run-up. You can see with the markings on this one here, we're looking at a fairly modern, you've got your safety stripes, your data, your flammable tags. Whoops. We seem to be going through the Amtrak again. There we go. Another modern. Somewhat older design, but still has the FRA required marker stripes. So these are perfectly natural on most of your modern industries, your modern layouts. Certainly, you've probably seen these throughout the country. Well, this is a little bit older. This is a little bit older design, and this one's representative of an older era. If you look at real closely, you can see the placard is a two-piece. You don't have the high-vis stripes. This is a car more indicative of the 1990s. So we've been listening to you guys that are modeling the 80s and 90s. We're listening. So we're offering these LPG cars for you. There's another Pro car, slightly more modern. And what do we have here? Well, you're probably thinking, is he going to sneak in any pictures of the RPM meet? Well, before I go on to that, those Genesis tank cars, the 33,000 gallon tank cars, those are also available until August 27th. That's a Friday. So if you've got some propane dealers on your layout and you need some cars from the 90s on up, these are perfect for your layout. And like I said, because of the detail of the Genesis line, these will definitely hold up in your photographs. Just absolutely beautiful cars, a lot of nice fine detail, and these frameless style tank cars, they just lend themselves well to the Genesis line. So moving forward, this past weekend I had the a chance to go down to the St. Louis RPM meet, and we set up a booth there. This is the first show that we've had to do this year, and it was kind of nice to be out on the road again, because with COVID shutting us down, shows, of course, were not a thing of possibility. This allowed us to come in and see a lot of you, and I'm hoping that some of you that I saw that past weekend, you're on board now. Here's our booth. This is a real simple tabletop type show. We showed off all of our current offerings that are in stock at your dealers now, from Roundhouse, Ready to Roll, and Genesis. And we also gave you guys a sneak peek of the Dash 9s and the SD70 ACU. You also see the little project layout that we're working on to take to shows and show in future broadcasts. We had a lot of great feedback from you guys, and we're glad to hear that you guys are happy with what we're doing. And stay tuned. We're going to be doing more surveys. We're going to be doing more emails and things where we want to hear back from you, whether it be on new products, new locomotives, new rolling stock, or just paint schemes. We want to hear from you, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're making the models that you want on your layout or your club layout. So to give you an idea of this show, the prototype meet's been around for a few years. It's one of the bigger prototype shows in the United States. And if you're not familiar with a prototype show, it's not your typical train show. This is the show where folks come up and display their models. It's mainly about the models. People display scratch-built models of certain structures. Sometimes there's heavily modeled and kit-bashed locomotives, freight cars, even vehicles. This show has a huge following of folks that do HO scale model automobiles. Here's an idea to give you. This is Bill Denton's N scale layout that he did of the Milwaukee Road, downtown Chicago. This gives you an idea of the scope of modeling that you would see at a prototype meet. This is N scale, by the way. Here's a fine representation of an auto rack, a 1960s auto rack. I'm not sure why the author chose to take a picture of the one with the 67 Mustangs on it, but this person has taken a kit and has tried to replicate it to the full scale as much as possible. And in this case, it looks like we've got some Chevy vans in the back, and then we've got these 67 Mustangs in the foreground here. Anybody recognize this? We actually talked about it on this show. I wanted to get a picture of it because we have done fire equipment in the past, but there's a favorite for all you TV fans from the late 70s and early 80s. And this gives you an idea of how many models. There were at least 4 rows of these tables, all filled with everything you can see here. In this case, we've got 187 scale, HO scale trucks and trailers. We've got locomotives, we had freight cars, and every scale was represented. Everything from Z all the way up to G was represented at this show. And this show is held every year in a convention center in St. Louis. And this year it broke records. We had, I believe, the attendance was over 750 715, 720, somewhere in that range. Doesn't sound that big when you think of a traditional train show, but keep in mind, these are the guys that are scratch building most of their stuff. And it's certainly a treat to be there and talk to you all and see what you think of our products and just see all the incredible modeling. We had a lot of you come to our booth and share some of your modeling of the Athearn brand, and we posted that on our social media. Hopefully you caught that. And we're looking forward to being back next year, and we're also looking forward to being back on the road again. So like I said, really nice to get back on the road and meet with you all and just have a really good time talking about models and trains and everything that has to do with it. Now, speaking of which, I do have a surprise for you. Last week, we started shipping the GP7s. The GP7s were announced last summer, and if you pre-ordered these, you either have them in your hands right now or your dealer is about to call you. But the GP7s and the Genesis line shipped our distribution center here in Champaign on Wednesday. And I think I've got some pictures here of it. Let's see. I've actually got some in the studio, it looks like. So let's go ahead and pan over there. And here we are. Now, this is just a small selection of what was included in that, that release. Now, the GP7s, these are incredible locomotives. Let's start in the middle. It's kind of hard not to see that middle locomotive, and I will admit I'm somewhat biased. The Illinois terminal. Now, the Illinois terminal, we've offered it in this run in 4 different numbers. 1600, 1601, and 1603. They were all done up as delivered 1953 paint scheme and what the ITC called their rubber band paint scheme. But 1602, which I have here, it's kind of a different deal. That has a 1960s repaint. So if you put 1602 next to any of the 3 previous models, you'll see a distinct difference in the paint. The green is a slightly different shade of green, and that's not by accident. That is based on the prototype. Again, this is where the Athearn developers really get into their research. So you'll notice that the green on this will be slightly different than the standard paint scheme. It's a 1960s repaint. And it's also got silver trucks and an underframe, which the originals did not. Now, one thing about the Illinois terminals, locomotives, they have dual cab controls, and we simulated that in the cab. Now, moving over, let's look at the Chessy locomotives. Now, we've also offered the Chessy also in 4 different road numbers, and we've offered them not only in just C&O as seen here, but B&O. And we've talked about it on the show before. Obviously, the C&O, it's going to be short hood forward. The B&O version, if you're at the St. Louis RPM meet, you'd see it was displayed long hood forward. That's the way the B&O did their locomotives. And you can tell with a Chessy locomotive which end is designated the front by which end has the logo, the distinct logo of Chessy the cat. Now, the one that I have here, number 5841, that's based on a C&O prototype. It has the Nathan M5 horn, dynamic brakes. Obviously, it's set up for the short hood forward, but it's also got the high nose mounted bell and the C&O style spark arresters. So that's definitely, if you were to put the B&O version right next to it, they would have the same paint scheme, but they would have differences. We've also got the Western Pacific and the Western Pacific repaints. The one that I have here in the studio is the Sacramento Western. That was a former Western Pacific. And we got the Santa Fe in the early switcher paint scheme of black with the barricade silver. And then, of course, another one that's somewhat local here is the New York Central. Now, you may be thinking, well, New York Central, I'm thinking of New York and Northeast. Why are we saying Illinois is local? Well, it's, if we look real carefully, look at the cab. You'll see a logo that's not quite what you'd normally see on a New York Central. It's the P&E. The P&E stands for the Peoria and Eastern. And actually, the Peoria and Eastern ran right through this area, not too far from where I'm talking right now. In fact, when I go home tonight, I will actually cross the P&E. The P&E was a successful branch of the New York Central, and if you remember the jade color boxcars that would have the quicker to Peoria, well, that's what they're talking about. It's the P&E. Now, unfortunately, the P&E is not what it used to be. It's now owned by Norfolk Southern. Pieces of it still exist, and pieces of it are still used for Class 1 freight, but the majority of the P&E, unfortunately, has been abandoned. So there's a special place for folks here in this part of the country for the P&E, and this is, as far as I know, is the first time this road has been offered in the Genesis line. All right, so I get a little bit of time. I'm going to check the comments here to my right, see what kind of questions we've got. We're going to wrap up the show after that. I got time for a few questions. So let's see what's going on out there and see what we're saying. Bradley wants to say Sacramento Northern. You are correct, Bradley. I think I had Western Pacific on my mind, so I apologize. That is Sacramento Northern. Let's see who else we have here. We've got some comments of what we would like to see. Anybody got any questions? Here's a question. Tommaso, he really likes the GP7s. He says they're gorgeous. Any chance of redoing the B&O Chessy GP9s again? It's been a while. It has been a little bit. Typically, when we do Chessy, we kind of wait a little bit, and then we'll do them again. I don't have any promises that we'll do the GP9s and Chessy right away, but eventually we probably will. I think it's a safe bet you'll see them again, just probably not real soon. Let's see. What else do we have? No use for it, but I really like the IT scheme. Yeah, it's a really eye-catching scheme. Now, some of you are not familiar with the IT, are probably wondering, why did they pick such a loud green? It's almost like a lemon lime green. Quite frankly, it's because of grade crossings. There were accidents at grade crossings, and their philosophy was if they painted their locomotives up in this bright, almost like a safety green, it would reduce the number of accidents at grade crossings. Did it work? Well, I guess history would have to be the judge on that. But for what it's worth, IT green is certainly one of those eye-catching colors that a lot of folks that have no connection with that railroad still like. Let's see if we've got some other comments. Thomas writes in, he says, you should do a Dodge paramedic rig from emergency and also as a maintenance away vehicle. Well, Thomas, that's a good comment. We are hoping to work on some new projects. We've done some vehicles in the past. We want to do some vehicles. Be looking here in the future. We'll be doing a survey at some point. We want to hear your feedback. Definitely maintenance away vehicles are something that we all need on our layout. And of course, that particular Dodge truck would be perfect for anybody modeling the 70s and 80s. It also makes a great paramedic truck, like you said. He's referencing that one picture I showed earlier of a very famous squad that was commented on a television show back in the late 70s, early 80s. I got time for one, maybe two more questions. Let's see. Casey, let's see. I'll take your question here. Any chance you guys can do an SD60 in the blue and white scheme? Well, Casey, are you talking about the original AMD paint scheme, the demonstrator type scheme, or the leaser scheme? Either way, we can probably do that again. The standard cab SD60s, probably won't be doing those right away, but at some point when we do offer those again, that's a suggestion that we can definitely take. And while I'm talking about suggestions, and I talked about it all weekend at the RPM meet, for all those out there that want to see a certain locomotive in a certain paint scheme, or they want to see a certain locomotive or rolling stock made, don't forget, go to athearn.com, go to the Contact Us page, and look for that product suggestion email. Now, again, our guys are reading those. Guys like John and Janik are reading those. They're taking all that information and they're keeping it, because we're going to keep producing models and we're going to want to know what you guys want. So don't think they're just going into nowhere. Our developers are reading those emails. All right, one more question, and then we're going to wrap it up for this week. Let's see. A lot of comments and suggestions. Don't forget that email. Let's see. Bradley, you are more than welcome. We love doing this for you guys. Kevin, I'm going to take your question. Where did you go, Kevin? Kevin wants to know, how's the parts department coming? That's a great and valid question. You know, the parts and service department have been busy, very, very busy. It's a huge undertaking. They are going through all the various different parts that they moved from California and brought here to Champaign. They're slowly organizing things, and they're rolling. They are getting parts sent out. Now, as with anything, we were shut down from taking parts for a little bit, so we're still asking kindly for your patience as we catch up with all those parts requests. But yeah, it's looking pretty good down there. I was down there last week, took a look, and man, things are nicely organized. Things are easier to find. So once we're up to 100%, parts will be moving along even better. So we appreciate your patience in this time for transition, and we're just trying to make Athearn better for you, the modeler. So with that, I want to go ahead and conclude this episode of Train Tuesday. Don't forget to join me again next Tuesday, 3:30 Central Time, and we'll do it all over again. We've got some great products to talk about. And until then, I want you all to be happy, be healthy, do some modeling, be kind of others, and of course, high greens, everybody. Take care.